So, as expected, Tulsi Gabbard was asked to field a question about the conflict in Syria and how she feels. It was in concert with regime change conversation, but they basically wanted to ask her how she felt about the Syrian situation, her visit with Assad, and all that good stuff, and because they just will not let the conversation die. Holy. But nonetheless, here it is. Or at least here's the first part. We're going to split it into two parts. But here's the first part.
Thank you. Do you remain skeptical, as you were in 2017, that Bashar al-Assad used chemical warfare against Syrian civilians?
I want to correct that because there's been some misunderstanding. There have been reports showing that chemical weapons have been used in Syria, both by the Syrian government as well as different terrorist groups on the ground in Syria. The skepticism and the questions that I raised were very specific around incidents that the Trump administration was trying to use as an excuse to launch a U.S. military attack in Syria. Now, I served in a war in Iraq, a war that was launched based on lies, and a war that was launched without evidence. And so the American people were duped. So as a soldier, as an American, as a member of Congress, it is my duty and my responsibility to exercise skepticism anytime anyone tries to send our service members into harm's way or use our military to go in and start a new war.
So, can I just say that she answered that brilliantly? So, let's break it down. They talked about the chemical attacks and saying that she has skepticism regarding this chemical attacks, and I don't really see what's hard to comprehend about that. If you're going to be running the free world, shouldn't you always practice skepticism before you make any major decision that could determine the outcomes of the lives of multiple people in multiple countries at that? And especially when it comes to situations such as these, oftentimes a president would be making the determination as to whether someone has a chance to live or die or is going to be put in harm's way. And they're trying to ask her to make a decision about that based off of, well, I hate to use this term because Trump has apparently co-opted it, but it is fake news. She says that there are reports, Tulsi starts off by saying that there are reports about the chemical weapons that are used and that were used by quote unquote the Syrian government and the rebels. And she goes on to say that specifically, those chemical attacks that were used to launch an attack or used to justify an attack against Syria are the ones that she's the most skeptical about. And those are the ones that they constantly critique her on. And she's skeptical, not only because of, just the fake news that has always surrounded regime change in the past, but also because they were really convenient. And then subsequently we got told by many communities, including some politicians, Rand Paul being one of them, that there was no chemical attack. Now, you don't have to take my word for this. Jim Mattis said this, that there was absolutely no evidence of terrorist attacks, or chemical attacks. However, he does go on to say that he wants to find evidence because, of course, he gonna get his war. This is Mad Dog Mattis. They call him that for a reason. But even still, for even Jim Mattis to come out and say, well, yeah, we didn't really find anything, which means we launched missiles at a country with no proof of chemical weapons. By the way, before an investigation had even gone underway. Now, her answer was also perfect because of the example that she chose to use. She said, Iraq, mic drop, boom. Can you believe that our country will, are you saying that our government will lie to us? That's what the moderator was trying to, you what? Our government, because I want you to understand about the blatant contradictions within the neoliberal media. In their mind, Trump can never be right. Trump is always lying. Trump is the enemy of the world. Trump aligns himself with dictators. Trump and his administration are just always fallible, and they're always at fault in the minds of neoliberal media, right? No matter how true or untrue it is, that's irrelevant. We're talking about in the minds of neoliberal media. So when Tulsi says, no, I wouldn't trust the government, and then she gets pushback from a liberal moderator working for CNN, are you saying you don't trust the government? Hold up, Miss blonde-headed moderator lady. Didn't you say about 150 times in the last month, and then 150,000 more times over the last year, and about 1 million times over the last 2 years, Trump is not to be trusted? That government does not have our best interests at heart, that he's trying to start a war, that he's aligning himself with dictator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So whoa. Which one is it? Which one is it? I thought that Trump is the worst thing to happen to America since the Kardashians in Jersey Shore. But now you're trying to tell me that we should also trust the government. And if Tulsi doesn't blindly trust the government, then somehow she's not president. Joe, I'm trying to understand what I'm getting torn in two different directions. And so are the American people. And I love the fact that Tulsi made sure to use Trump's name. She said, because the Trump administration tried to use that to establish regime change. Boom. Argue with me. Go ahead. Go ahead. Like she dared the moderator to argue that point. But then what would the moderator have to do? The moderator would then have to say, yeah, we agree with Trump's administration and his government. They're not going to do that. Now, she quickly changes subjects. She stays on Syria, but then tries to go ahead and do that emotional reactionary thing that they love doing. When they back themselves into a corner, they then try to appeal to emotion after the appeal to authority wouldn't work. Let's look at that clip.
War.
May I just ask a follow about that? Because, Congresswoman, the Defense Department, the United Nations agree that the Assad regime used chemical weapons against its own people. So, as president, would you trust the conclusions of your government?
Well, like I said, we have in our recent past a situation where our own government told lies to the American people and to the United Nations, for that matter, to launch a war. So what I'm saying is it is our responsibility to exercise due diligence, to ask the tough questions, to get the evidence before we make those very costly decisions about how and when and where our military is used.
While we're on the topic of Syria, this week, Syrian refugees in Jordan, they requested that the first international criminal court case against the Syrian government commence. You met Bashar al-Assad in 2017. Do you believe that Assad is a war criminal?
I think that the evidence needs to be gathered. And as I have said before, if there is evidence that he has committed war crimes, he should be prosecuted as such.
But you're not sure now?
Everything that I have said requires that we take action based on evidence. The evidence is there. There should be accountability.
So, first of all, that was kind of like a weird exchange, because she says some Syrian rebels, or some Syrian refugees in Jordan. Okay. Who are these Syrian refugees? What are their credentials? What do they know about the ICC? Like, what do they know is the requisite for processing human rights atrocities and taking people to court? Were those Syrian refugees simultaneously calling for Netanyahu to be prosecuted? I'm not about the whataboutisms, but what I'm saying is you can't say something open-ended like that, gloss over the fact that that's kind of a weird generalization. Okay, there are random people on Twitter that call for Assad's prosecution in the International Criminal Court as well. Are they qualified to make such assertions? I'm just out of curiosity. Once again, this is separate as to from whether or not he did it or not. That's totally separate. What is that? Why is that question being posed is what I'm asking. And the answer is, like I said before the clip, it's an appeal to emotion. And it was done on purpose. They first tried to appeal to authority. And I covered this in my live stream, and I don't mind talking about it a little bit here. They tried to appeal to authority by saying, hold on, if you're president, you're not going to trust your government? Once again, why would I not exercise skepticism when our government has been known to lie? I saw the most beautiful meme, perfectly embodying this situation. They had the picture of the moderator asking the question, so you're not going to trust your own government? And then there was a picture at the bottom with JFK looking at her saying, no, Dana, I'm not going to trust my own government. And it was, obviously JFK didn't say that, but that is the perfect embodiment of it. I mean, our government is still literally hiding the JFK assassination from us because they're guilty of assassinating JFK. I mean, don't take a rocket science to figure that out. I mean, they were found guilty of assassinating MLK also. Like, these things, why would we trust our government knowing what we know? Luckily, we do have the benefit of hindsight. And hindsight will indeed be 2020 for this election. Pun intended. So when they tried that appeal to authority, Tulsi handled it perfectly. I mean, it was brilliant. She was like, no, we're going to appeal to logic instead. Let's appeal to logic. Let's appeal to reason. Let's talk about the past. Let's talk about our collective experiences. And then I'll talk about my experiences as a veteran. And that's how we'll handle this situation, not by your appeal to authority. And that appeal to authority, once again, is being made because the establishment feels as if they are losing their authoritative grip on the American public opinion. And they are, and they feel it. So now it's like their appeal to authority is blatant. It is because it's out of desperation that you don't believe the government? And they did the same thing to Bernie. And they want people to react how we've been trained to react when someone questions an authority we have been conditioned to believe is unquestionable. When people don't react like that, then they go on to the next step, which is appeal to emotion. So they talk about these random refugees. I don't even know if they exist. Once again, not like CNN is the most credible, considering they've been destroying their credibility ever since the end of 2016. And before that even. So let's just say, for instance, these refugees are real. And they are in Jordan. I don't know how their question made it all the way to CNN. They didn't tell us that. But they're saying that they want to see him tried in the International Criminal Court for war crimes. Okay. I don't see, the premise for why he would be questioned, I believe is questionable. That part I agree with. But if it means clearing his name, why not? But the problem with all of that is, like Tulsi said, if there's evidence, then he should be tried and prosecuted for the said war crimes. But then I believe Dana is her name, or Dana, says, oh, you won't say he's a war criminal? Didn't you just say he is yet to be prosecuted in court? Like, we haven't even had the trial yet, correct? And then what she say, well, but the United Nations and the United States said, okay, once again, let's go back over this. For the crowd, who lied to us in Iraq? The United States. That's not really what happened. It would have been funny if she would have did that. But that's basically what do we have to go over this again and again? The government has lied. So you trying to use the government to justify going to go to war or institute a regime change in any given nation. It doesn't work anymore, nor will we base our opinions off that. And I love the fact that the crowd immediately reacted to her telling the truth about the regime change in Iraq. And they clapped loudly when she called out the government lying to us. People are waking up. It's not going to work anymore. It isn't. everything they try, it just, Bernie and Tulsi are like, what's that show? Gumbo? The guy with the blue guy that bent around everything and like, hey, yeah, they're like that. I don't know what the show is called, but you know what I'm talking about. I think it was called Gumby. I used to watch it when I was a kid. But it isn't going to work anymore. So Tulsi asked for evidence. And because she asked for evidence and says that will be how I proceed, she's somehow unpresidential. If you ask me, that makes her perfectly presidential. I'm just saying. Don't you agree? I think so. Like, that is the definition of, hey, can we have evidence before we react? Thank you. It's almost like they want her to be like Trump, despite the fact that they claim they don't like Trump. They want her to be reactionary. They want her to be a puppet of the establishment that actually runs the government behind the scenes. They want her to be that. But they claim that they don't like that about Trump. They want her to be a loose cannon and just react. But they claim they don't like that about Trump. So which one is it? Which one is it? And the truth of the matter is this. Anyone who is perceived as being outside of the establishment is not going to be accepted. When Trump does things that is considered outside of the establishment, they call it out. It's the worst thing ever, every single time. But when he's in lockstep with both the Democratic and Republican establishments, like when it came to when it comes to droning Syria, like when it comes to this coup in Venezuela, all of a sudden, not only do they not say anything, they actually support the things that he does. And then they attack anyone who disagrees with the neoconservative policies or Trump's neoconservative foreign policy. Isn't that interesting? Now, Tulsi is damn near, I don't want to say she's like Trump because Trump is just, ugh. But as far as her being the perceivably furthest outside of the establishment, she is more outside of the establishment than Bernie is. And I'm not saying that as an insult to Bernie. But the Democrats they still embrace Bernie, right? The Democratic establishment does. They embraced his policies. They've embraced his message. They won't even attack him anymore, as the politicians won't, because they know what it means. But they have yet to show that embrace towards Tulsi. Why? Because of Syria and that conversation. Because of Venezuela and that conversation. Because Tulsi wants to address election justice and all the things that come with that. Basically, Tulsi wants accountability. And she wants to use logic to run the country. And God forbid we do something like that. Because then that could potentially mean the end of the establishment. Now, what's funniest about all this is that Tulsi uses common sense to answer these questions. Saying we should have evidence is literally nothing but common sense and one of the core values that the United States was founded upon, due process, right? We should not be making any judgment of guilt or non-guilt or guilt or innocence before we have due process, before the stories have developed, before we have a discovery phase. And we have yet to have we've had discovery enough to know that our government has been lying to us even about Syria. We have enough information for that. So Tulsi's answer was a little saddened by her answer on The View. She corrected herself here. Happy about that. Finally, before I go, I just want to quickly say, it needs to be understood that Assad probably doesn't want to go to the ICC because he knows who it is run by. It is ran by the allies of the United States of America. Just like the Security Council in the United States, in the United Nations, is for the most part ran by the United States of America and its allies outside of Russia. So of course, when the Security Council said something or makes a conclusion, people are like, well, if the UN said it, the UN doesn't say this, by the way. It is most often the Security Council of the UN at the guidance of the United States. That's the part that Dana left out of her question or her response to Tulsi. Overall, Tulsi handled that question beautifully. Killed it, loved it. We're going to do some more coverage of this as well. Not this, but just other segments of the town hall. But overall, just dealing with this question, she handled both the question and the moderator's response perfectly. And I mean, I just think it's going to win her more votes. It's definitely going she definitely won some hearts tonight in that crowd. Thank you for watching that segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. Help us reach our goal of 500 patrons. You can do so by donating as little as $1 by clicking on the Patreon link in the description below. Don't forget, join us on Roku and JustNForm. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook as well. And remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.